You really don't want to do that. The words were calm, almost gentle, but they cut through the morning traffic like a blade. On West Adams Street in downtown Chicago, where the air smelled of coffee carts, hot concrete, and impatient ambition, a black SUV sat quietly against the curb in front of the federal courthouse. Its paint reflected the pale sunlight. Its windows were dark. Its engine was off. And at that exact moment, the steel hook of a tow truck was sliding beneath its front axle. Officer Ryan Keller smirked as he folded his arms across his chest. 6'2", broad shoulders, mirrored sunglasses, and the kind of confidence that often comes from never being questioned. He stood beside the tow truck like a man directing a show he had performed 100 times before. Then maybe you should have parked somewhere legal, Ryan said loudly, making sure the people nearby could hear him. A few pedestrians slowed down. Phones began to rise. Someone whispered that they were recording. Ryan liked that. Men like him often did. 20 feet away stood Marcus Ellison, 38 years old. Dark navy suit, no tie, polished shoes, leather briefcase in one hand. Nothing flashy. Nothing dramatic. He looked like a man on his way to work, because he was. Yet Ryan had taken one glance at him 10 minutes earlier and decided something else entirely. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't step forward. He simply checked the time on a silver watch and exhaled once, slow and controlled. "Officer," he said, "that vehicle is authorized to be here." Ryan laughed hard enough for others to hear. "Sure it is. And I'm the mayor." A few nervous chuckles drifted through the sidewalk crowd. Marcus said nothing. The city moved around them in waves of noise. Horns, buses sighing at red lights, heels striking pavement, train tracks rattling somewhere overhead. But in the middle of all that motion, the moment felt strangely still. The tow truck driver, Pete Lawson, crouched near the front tire, adjusting the hook. He had been doing repossessions and city tows for nearly 15 years. Long enough to know when something felt wrong. He glanced at the windshield and frowned. There, tucked low in the corner behind tinted glass, was a small blue decal. Not parking enforcement. Not city permit. Something else. Official. Pete looked again at the license plate. Plain numbers. No vanity text. But the spacing was unusual. Clean. Deliberate. "You got a problem down there?" Ryan called. Pete hesitated. "Nah. Just checking clearance." Ryan turned back toward Marcus. "Here's how this goes. You step aside, your car gets impounded, and maybe next time you learn the rules." Marcus met his stare with unsettling calm. "You think this is about rules?" Ryan's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to that tone. Not angry. Not fearful. Worse. Certain. He stepped closer. "I think it's about people who believe they can do whatever they want." Marcus gave the smallest nod, as if confirming something only he understood. "Interesting," he said, "because I was thinking the same thing." More phones lifted. A woman near the bus stop muttered, "This man is too calm." She was right. Marcus wasn't calm because he was helpless. He was calm because panic belonged to people who didn't know what was coming. Pete slid out from under the SUV and stood up slowly. "Officer Keller," he said under his breath, "you might want to look at this tag." Ryan didn't even turn. "Hook it." Pete didn't move. The sunlight flashed across the SUV's grille, revealing a tiny insignia almost invisible unless you were close enough to see it. Marcus adjusted the cuff of his sleeve and looked toward the courthouse doors as they began to open. "Last chance," he said quietly. "Take the hook off my car." The courthouse doors opened with the slow authority of a place used to deciding other people's futures. Men in dark suits stepped out first, speaking into earpieces, scanning the sidewalk with practiced eyes. Then came a woman in a charcoal overcoat, silver hair pinned neatly back, posture straight enough to silence a room before she spoke. Captain Laura Bennett did not rush. She never needed to. The crowd sensed it before Ryan Keller did. Conversations thinned. Phones rose higher. Even the traffic noise seemed to drift backward for a moment. Marcus Ellison glanced toward her and gave the slightest nod. Ryan noticed the exchange and frowned. "Who is that?" he asked no one in particular. Pete Lawson had already taken 2 steps away from the SUV. "Officer," he said quietly, "I think we should stop this now." Ryan turned sharply. "I did not ask what you think." Pete swallowed and looked at the plate again. "I am telling you this vehicle is not standard." Ryan's expression hardened the way some men's faces do when pride begins to feel threatened. He walked to the front of the SUV and finally bent low enough to see what Pete had seen. The tiny insignia near the grille. The coded fleet marker embedded behind the windshield decal. The reinforced bumper brackets not sold to the public. His jaw flexed once, but only once. Then he straightened and laughed too loudly. Nice try. You people watch too many movies. Marcus remained still. Do you always talk this much before making a mistake? Ryan stepped closer. You do not get to lecture me. No, Marcus said evenly. Today, I do not have to. Captain Bennett crossed the sidewalk with two agents beside her. Their coats moved in the wind, revealing badges clipped at their belts. Not city badges. Federal credentials. Real authority has a different shape. It does not need volume. It does not need performance. It simply arrives, and the room changes around it. Ryan felt that shift before the woman even spoke. Who is in charge here? She asked. Her voice was calm, low, and impossible to ignore. Ryan lifted his chin. Officer Ryan Keller, Chicago Police Department. This vehicle is being removed for illegal parking. Captain Bennett looked at the curb, then at the posted placard mounted on the pole beside it. Federal Access Zone. Authorized vehicles only. Time-stamped permit code beneath it. Ryan had not noticed, or had not cared to. She turned back to him. Is that your final statement? Something in the question unsettled him. He glanced toward Marcus, hoping to recover control. This man claimed the car was authorized. He did not claim, she said. He informed you. A murmur moved through the crowd. Marcus checked his watch again. 9:12, he said softly. I am now 7 minutes late. Ryan tried to regain ground. Ma'am, with respect, I was enforcing city ordinance. Captain Bennett opened a leather folder and removed a single sheet. This curb lane falls under federal jurisdiction during business hours. Your department was notified 6 months ago. She paused. And that vehicle is assigned to Deputy Director Marcus Ellison. The words landed harder than any shout could have. Ryan stared at Marcus as if seeing him for the first time. The briefcase, the composure, the certainty. All the signs he had mistaken for arrogance were something else entirely. Rank, discipline, authority. Pete took another step backward and quietly removed the hook from the axle. Metal clinked against pavement. Cameras caught every second. Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it. Some silences are chosen. Others are earned. Captain Bennett extended her hand toward Marcus. Sir, the task force is assembled upstairs. Marcus accepted the folder she offered and turned to Ryan one last time. You saw the suit, he said. You saw the car. You saw the signs. But bias can make a man blind. Then he walked toward the courthouse doors while the crowd parted in complete silence. The elevator doors closed behind Marcus Ellison with a soft metallic whisper, shutting out the sidewalk noise, the cameras, and the stunned silence Officer Ryan Keller had been left standing in. Inside the mirrored walls, everything felt colder, cleaner, sharper. Captain Laura Bennett stood beside him, hands folded over a thin folder stamped with a federal seal. Neither of them spoke for the first 10 floors. Some moments do not need words. They need distance. On the 12th floor, the doors opened into a secured operations suite where agents moved with measured urgency between glass offices and glowing screens. Maps covered one wall. Case files were stacked across a long conference table. Coffee cups sat untouched beside laptops. The room carried the scent of paper, steel, and pressure. A young analyst approached first. Sir, the Chicago package is ready. Marcus nodded and placed his briefcase on the table. Any leaks? None confirmed. Any warnings? Only one. The analyst hesitated. Local resistance. Marcus almost smiled. We passed that. Downstairs. Around the room, a few agents exchanged glances. They had seen the livestream clips already. Officer Keller's face was spreading across social media faster than he could imagine. The comments were divided exactly the way they always were. Some defended him instantly. Some condemned him instantly. But many more were asking the dangerous question systems fear most. How often does this happen when no camera is recording? Marcus opened his briefcase and removed a thick binder filled with names, contracts, shipping logs, and internal memos. We begin now, he said. His voice was calm, but the room straightened around it. Today is not about one officer. Today is about the network that believed no one was watching. Captain Bennett dimmed the lights and activated the main screen. A flowchart appeared, lines connecting private towing companies, municipal contracts, seized property auctions, shell vendors, and city officials. Money had moved quietly for years. Vehicles taken under questionable citations. Fees inflated. Complaints buried. Certain neighborhoods targeted more than others. Certain drivers stopped more than others. Bias had not only been personal, it had been profitable. Marcus looked around the table. People think corruption always looks dramatic. It usually looks administrative. A few grim nods followed. One senior investigator slid a file toward him. We also found repeated mentions of Keller. He may not be leadership, but he opened doors. Marcus flipped through pages. Complaint histories. Selective enforcement patterns. Unusual tow requests. Dismissed internal reviews. The familiar architecture of protection. He closed the file gently. Then he will be interviewed after lunch. Downtown, Ryan Keller sat alone in a small supervisor office at the precinct, replaying the sidewalk scene in his head. The moment the woman said deputy director. The moment the crowd looked at him differently. The moment certainty left his body. His captain had taken his badge and placed him on administrative leave pending review. No yelling. No speech. Just procedure. Sometimes that feels worse. Ryan checked his phone and saw hundreds of notifications. Friends asking what happened. Strangers calling him names. Reporters requesting comment. He turned the screen face down. For years he had believed authority was something you wore on your chest. Something visible. Something that made other people smaller. Now he was learning another version existed. The kind that needed no display at all. Back at the courthouse, Marcus stood near the conference room window overlooking the city. Trains moved like silver threads between buildings. Tiny people crossed intersections, unaware of the decisions above them. Captain Bennett stepped beside him. You handled Keller with restraint. Marcus kept his eyes on the street below. I handled him with memory. She understood. Men like Ryan were rarely the first. Only the latest. Ready? She asked. Marcus turned toward the room full of agents, files, and waiting consequences. More than ever, he walked back to the table and opened the binder to page 1. Let us begin with the towing contracts, he said. That hook touched the wrong car this morning. Now it is pulling up everything attached to it. By 1:30 in the afternoon, the city had begun to feel the tremor. Not an earthquake of sirens or headlines, but the quieter kind that moves through offices, inboxes, and closed doors. Phones rang longer than usual. Meetings were canceled without explanation. Men who had ignored ethics for years suddenly asked where certain files were kept. On the 12th floor, Marcus Ellison watched the first wave unfold across 3 monitors. Search warrants approved. Financial subpoenas delivered. Internal records preserved before they could disappear. What had started on a curbside hook was now pulling threads through half the city. Captain Laura Bennett entered the operations room carrying a fresh stack of folders. We have cooperation from transportation compliance, she said. Faster than expected. Marcus glanced up. Fear speeds paperwork. She placed the folders on the table. And we have resistance from the mayor's liaison. Of course we do. He opened the top file. Towing invoices charged at triple rate. Storage fees for cars never impounded. Auction transfers routed through shell companies. Registered to cousins, friends, and former campaign donors. Every page smelled of arrogance. The kind that believes paperwork can hide anything. An analyst pointed to the screen. We found concentration zones. A city map lit up in red clusters. South Side neighborhoods. West Side corridors. Areas where complaints had been highest and legal resources had been lowest. Marcus studied it without speaking. Numbers can say cruel things when arranged honestly. So they knew exactly where to hunt, he said. No one answered because no one needed to. Across town, Ryan Keller sat in civilian clothes at his kitchen table, the room too quiet around him. His badge was gone. His service belt was locked at the precinct. On the television, a local anchor discussed an unfolding federal review into municipal towing practices. Footage of the morning confrontation played behind her. There he was, sunglasses on, jaw set, standing beside a hook he no longer controlled. Ryan muted the screen. The silence did not help. He replayed every decision in his mind, searching for one small turn he could have taken differently. Ask a question. Read the sign. Listen to the driver. Walk away. Pride often collapses under the weight of tiny alternatives. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Sergeant Daniel Ruiz. Ryan answered immediately. Tell me this blows over. There was a pause. Ryan, Ruiz said carefully. Federal agents were in records this morning. They asked for your tow requests going back 3 years. Ryan stared at the dark television. I was doing my job. Ruiz sighed. That sentence sounds different depending on who says it. The line went dead. Back at the courthouse, Marcus entered interview room B, where Pete Lawson waited nervously with a paper cup trembling in both hands. The tow driver stood when Marcus walked in. "Sir, I did not know what they were using us for." Marcus sat across from him. "Then tell me what you did know." Pete swallowed hard. "We got lists. Certain blocks. Certain plates. We were told some cars would not fight back. That they could not afford lawyers." He lowered his eyes. "And if someone complained, Officer Keller usually handled it." Marcus let the silence sit for a moment. Truth often enters only after quiet has made space for it. "Did you ever question why some neighborhoods were hit more than others?" Pete nodded slowly. "I did. I just liked my paycheck more than the answer." Marcus wrote one note on a yellow pad. "Honesty delayed is still useful." When Pete left, Captain Bennett stepped inside. "We have enough for coordinated arrests by morning." Marcus closed the file. "No. Tonight." She raised an eyebrow. "Why the rush?" Marcus looked through the glass wall toward the city beyond. "Because men who live off privilege do not wait politely for consequences. They start shredding evidence the moment embarrassment arrives." Rain began tapping against the courthouse windows, soft at first, then steady. Chicago streets blurred under gray light. Somewhere below, tow trucks still moved through traffic, unaware that by nightfall several would be parked for good. Marcus straightened his tie and headed back to the operations room. "Send the teams," he said. The meter on borrowed power just expired. By 7:40 that evening, the rain had washed the sidewalks clean, but not the city. Water ran along the curbs in silver ribbons while unmarked federal SUVs moved through downtown like quiet punctuation marks at the end of long, dishonest sentences. Inside the operations suite, monitors glowed against dim walls as teams checked locations, warrants, and body cameras. Marcus Ellison stood at the center table, studying a list of names one final time. Some belonged to towing executives, some to municipal clerks, some to officers who had mistaken routine misconduct for permanent protection. Captain Laura Bennett approached with a tablet in hand. "All teams are in position." Marcus nodded. "Any movement from Keller?" "He has not left his apartment." Marcus looked back to the list. "He will soon." Men like him always believe they can still explain their way out. Across town, Ryan Keller paced his living room in socks and wrinkled slacks, the television flashing silent headlines he no longer wanted to read. Federal probe expands. City towing scandal widens. Video sparks outrage. He had packed a duffel bag twice and unpacked it twice. Running sounded dramatic in movies. In real life, it usually looked like a grown man standing still, unable to choose. On his kitchen counter sat the framed academy graduation photo he used to admire. Younger face, straighter posture, eyes that still believed the badge meant honor automatically. Ryan picked up the frame, then set it down harder than he intended. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. "Ryan Keller?" a calm voice asked. "Yes. This is Special Agent Thomas Reed. We are outside your residence with a warrant for electronic devices and records. We request your cooperation." Ryan's throat tightened. "For what?" "You may ask your attorney that question." The line ended. He looked through the blinds and saw two dark vehicles parked below. No lights. No drama. Real consequences rarely need theatrics. At the same time on the south side, another team entered the offices of Metrolink Recovery Services. Accounting ledgers were boxed. Hard drives were sealed. A manager who had laughed through city hearings now sat pale and speechless in a conference room beside stale donuts and framed awards. In City Hall Annex offices, clerks who once misplaced complaints suddenly remembered every password. Across 3 precincts, supervisors were notified that prior internal reviews would be reopened. The system was discovering that memory can return quickly when subpoenaed. Back at the courthouse, Marcus watched status updates appear one by one. Devices secured. Records obtained. Interviews scheduled. Cooperation offered. Resistance noted. He did not celebrate. He had learned long ago that exposure is not the same as repair. Pulling rod into daylight does not instantly rebuild the wood. An analyst approached. "Sir, social media is turning you into something of a legend." Marcus almost smiled. "That usually means people are bored by facts." She laughed nervously and handed him another report. "Community legal groups are asking if they can submit older cases." He read the first page. Towed after church. Vehicle sold before hearing. Disabled veteran charged storage fees for a car never moved. A mother lost work after her only transportation disappeared. Injustice becomes ordinary when repeated enough times. That is its most dangerous form. Marcus closed the folder gently. Open a public intake portal tonight. 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 Captain Bennett looked over. You think there are that many? Marcus met her eyes. I think this city has been waiting to be believed. Downstairs, the rain finally stopped. Streetlights reflected on wet pavement like scattered gold. Ryan Keller opened his apartment door to find Agent Reed waiting calmly in the hallway with 2 investigators behind him. No raised voices. No threats. Just paperwork and patience. Ryan stepped aside because for the first time all day, he understood there was no audience left to impress. Agent Reed entered and glanced around the room. Mr. Keller, he said evenly, where would you like to begin? Miles away, Marcus stood by the courthouse window watching the clouds break over Chicago. Some storms flood streets. Others clean them. He straightened the stack of incoming complaints and said to no one in particular, now we find out how many cars were never the real target. Morning arrived gray and cold, the kind of Chicago morning that makes every building look like it is holding its breath. By 6:30, lines had already formed outside the federal courthouse. Reporters stood beneath umbrellas with practiced urgency, microphones ready, hair fixed against the wind. Community members gathered farther back, clutching folders, towing receipts, photographs, and years of frustration. Some had come for answers. Some had come simply to witness a day they never thought would happen. Inside, the operations floor was brighter than usual. Coffee steamed beside stacks of evidence. Printers hummed without rest. Names were being sorted into categories no corrupt system likes to hear aloud. Witness, victim, cooperating source, subject. Marcus Ellison entered carrying a slim binder instead of his usual briefcase. He looked rested, which surprised people who did not know him well. Pressure did not make him louder. It made him clearer. Captain Laura Bennett met him near the conference table. We processed 143 public submissions overnight. Marcus paused. That many. And still climbing. She handed him the first summary packet. Wrongful tows after midnight. Fees charged on already released vehicles. Cars taken from legal handicap spaces. Complaints dismissed without review. He turned pages slowly, each story different only in surface details. Same pattern. Same assumption. Same confidence that no one important would care. Set up 3 intake teams, he said, and notify Civil Rights Council. Bennett studied him. You expected this. Marcus closed the packet. I expected pain. I did not know the inventory. Across the city, Ryan Keller stepped out of a black sedan, wearing the same suit from the previous day, now wrinkled at the shoulders. 2 investigators walked beside him through a side entrance of the courthouse. No handcuffs. No cameras allowed inside that hallway. Public humiliation had never been the point. Accountability was. Ryan kept his eyes forward as if focus alone could rebuild dignity. In interview room 3, Agent Thomas Reed placed a recorder on the table and spoke with professional calm. This is a voluntary interview. You may stop at any time. Ryan nodded. His voice came out dry. I want to cooperate. Reed slid over a stack of tow authorizations. Then start with these. Ryan looked down and felt something unfamiliar move through him. Not anger. Not fear. Recognition. His own signature repeated across pages he once considered routine. Streets he targeted more often than others. Requests pushed through without review. Calls made because certain cars looked suspicious to him before he knew anything else. He had called it instinct. The documents called it pattern. Back upstairs, Marcus entered the public hearing room, where folding chairs filled quickly with residents, attorneys, clergy leaders, and city staff pretending not to sweat. A woman in her 60s approached first, holding a faded envelope. They took my son's truck 3 years ago, she said. He missed work and lost his apartment. Marcus accepted the envelope with both hands. Respect is often visible in small gestures. We will review it, he said. Her eyes watered. No one has ever said that before. He wanted to answer, but some truths are too heavy for polite rooms. He simply nodded. One by one they came. A delivery driver. A school nurse. A veteran using a cane. A college student who slept in libraries after losing her car, and then her job. Stories flowed with the strange force of a dam finally cracking. Not dramatic. Worse. Ordinary. That is how injustice survives longest. by becoming normal enough to schedule around. Near noon, Captain Bennett stepped beside Marcus and handed him a note. Keller requests to speak directly with you. Marcus read it once. Where? Interview room 3. He considered the paper, then folded it neatly. Yesterday, Ryan Keller had spoken from curbside certainty. Today, he was requesting conversation. Power changes tone quickly when mirrors appear. Marcus handed the note back. Give him 15 minutes. Bennett raised an eyebrow. Why wait? Marcus looked across the crowded room of people still holding receipts like evidence of stolen time. Because for years they waited much longer. 15 minutes can feel short to a free man and endless to one who finally understands consequences. Ryan Keller learned that difference alone in interview room 3. The walls were plain, the table scarred by years of elbows and confessions, the clock louder than it needed to be. He had once brought people into rooms like this believing time belonged to him. Now every second seemed borrowed. Agent Thomas Reed stood by the door reading messages from headquarters while saying nothing. Silence had become the room's most skilled investigator. When the handle finally turned, Ryan straightened instinctively. Marcus Ellison entered carrying only a legal pad and a bottle of water. No entourage, no performance. He sat across from Ryan with the same calm expression he had worn on the sidewalk. The same expression Ryan now understood had never been weakness. Reed activated the recorder and stepped back. You requested this meeting, Marcus said. Ryan swallowed. I wanted to explain. Marcus nodded once. That word usually arrives late. Ryan looked down at his hands. Yesterday, they had rested on a duty belt. Today they looked like evidence. I made assumptions, he said. About you. About the car. About the situation. Marcus waited. Some people rush to fill silence because truth sounds louder beside it. Ryan continued. I thought I was doing my job. Marcus leaned back slightly. No. You thought your judgment did not require facts. The sentence landed clean and sharp. Ryan opened his mouth, then closed it. He had no training for conversations where rank could not protect him. I am not a racist, he said finally, the phrase sounding rehearsed even to himself. Marcus studied him for a moment. Many people treat that word like it only applies to monsters. He folded his hands on the table. Most damage is done by ordinary people who excuse themselves. Ryan felt heat rise in his face. Outside the room, courthouse halls buzzed with witnesses arriving and reporters speculating. Inside, the air stayed still. I never hated anyone, Ryan said quietly. Hatred is loud, Marcus replied. Bias is efficient. Reed looked up from the wall, but did not interrupt. Marcus continued, voice even. Hatred burns crosses. Bias denies loans, ignores complaints, follows certain cars, trusts certain faces, doubts certain voices, and calls it instinct. Ryan stared at the table as years rearranged themselves in his mind. Traffic stops, tow requests, neighborhood patrol patterns. The jokes he did not start but repeated. The complaints he dismissed before reading. Nothing dramatic enough for headlines on its own. That was the point. What happens to me now, he asked. Marcus almost smiled, but not from pleasure. That is the first honest question you have asked. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were statements from residents, audit findings, and a notice of departmental review. Your future will be decided by process. The same thing many people were denied. Ryan flipped pages with shaking fingers. Names, dates, streets he remembered, people he did not. I cannot undo this. No, Marcus said, but you can stop lying about it. The room grew quiet again. Ryan looked up for the first time. Why did you come in here yourself? Marcus considered the question. Because men like you often think accountability is revenge. I wanted you to see the difference. He stood, gathering the legal pad. Revenge humiliates. Accountability records. Ryan felt something in him give way then. Not dramatic, not visible, but real. The collapsing of the story he had told himself for years. Marcus moved toward the door, then paused. Yesterday you asked if I thought I could do whatever I wanted. Ryan said nothing. No, Marcus said softly. I simply knew what I was allowed to do. There is a difference. He opened the door. Noise from the hallway poured in like weather. Before stepping out, he turned once more. You judged a man by sight in under 10 seconds. Spend the next 10 years learning how expensive that can be. Then he walked into the corridor where cameras waited for statements, citizens waited for answers, and a city waited to see whether systems could learn what one man had been forced to learn in a single room. By late afternoon, The hearing room on the fourth floor was full beyond capacity. Folding chairs lined the walls, reporters stood shoulder to shoulder near the back, and people who had once felt invisible now filled every remaining space with patient expectation. Some carried folders thick with receipts and notices. Others carried nothing but memory. Outside the tall windows, Chicago's sunlight broke through the clouds for the first time all day, casting long bars of gold across the polished floor. Inside, the city was about to hear itself speak. Marcus Ellison stood at the front beside Captain Laura Bennett and a panel of federal auditors. He wore the same Navy suit from the morning before, still crisp, still understated. To some, it looked like ordinary clothing. To others, it had become a symbol of something many had forgotten existed. Quiet authority. The clerk called the session to order. Microphones clicked on. Pens lifted. Cameras steadied. Marcus began without flourish. This review was opened because one public interaction revealed a private pattern. He let the sentence settle. What we found was larger than one encounter and older than one officer. Screens behind him illuminated charts, contracts, maps, and timelines. Towing zones clustered around vulnerable neighborhoods. Complaint dismissals rising in. Suspicious rhythm. Storage fees inflated beyond policy. Internal reviews closed within hours. A city had not been failing accidentally. It had been organized. Murmurs moved through the room like wind through dry leaves. In the second row, an elderly man removed his cap and held it in both hands. Beside him, a young mother wiped tears she had promised herself she would not shed in public. Captain Bennett stepped forward next. Effective immediately, 23 municipal contracts are suspended pending criminal and civil review. Gasps followed. 3 supervisors are relieved of duty. 7 officers are under formal investigation. An independent claims process opens tonight. The room, so tense moments earlier, exhaled all at once. Not celebration. Relief. There is a difference. Near the rear entrance, Ryan Keller sat beside counsel in a plain gray suit. No badge. No sunglasses. No audience left to command. He watched the screens display records he once assumed no one would connect. Dates he barely remembered now mattered to strangers whose lives had bent around them. For the first time, he was experiencing what many citizens had known for years. The weight of someone else's unchecked decisions. Marcus noticed him, but did not pause. Systems do not become unjust in one day, he said. They become unjust one excused act at a time. He invited the first residents forward. A retired nurse spoke of losing her car before dawn and missing a week of work. A veteran described storage fees larger than his monthly rent. A college student explained how one tow had cost her tuition money. Their voices were steady, ordinary, devastating. No dramatic language. None needed. Truth told plainly can shake stronger walls than anger ever could. Reporters stopped searching for sound bites and simply wrote. In the hallway outside, city employees refreshed phones and reconsidered loyalties. Markets noticed scandal quickly. Conscience usually takes longer. After 2 hours, the clerk announced final remarks. Marcus stepped to the microphone one last time. Many people ask how this started, he said. It started when too many assumed some people could be inconvenienced without consequence. He glanced briefly toward Ryan, then back to the room. It continues today only if we learn nothing. The hearing adjourned to applause that rose slowly, then fully, not for one man, but for recognition itself. People lined up to submit claims, ask questions, shake hands, and simply stand near a process that had finally turned toward them. Ryan remained seated after others stood. His attorney whispered that they should leave through the side corridor. Ryan nodded but did not move. On the screen behind the panel, frozen from the final slide, remained a photograph from a street camera taken the day before. A tow hook under a black SUV. An officer standing certain. A man standing calm. Ryan stared at it as if looking at an older version of himself aged by only 24 hours. Outside, the evening sun reflected off courthouse windows and lit the wet streets below. Some lessons arrive in classrooms. Others arrive when the city watches you learn them in public. 3 weeks later, Chicago had entered that strange season when winter loosens its grip, but spring has not yet earned trust. Snowmelt ran along curbs and thin streams, and the wind still carried enough bite to remind people not to celebrate too early. Some things in the city had changed quickly. Others had only begun. Temporary restitution offices now occupied 2 floors of the old municipal building. Residents came daily with receipts, title records, missed court notices, and stories once dismissed as exaggeration. Claims were processed. Fees were refunded. Suspensions became terminations. Contracts were rewritten under public scrutiny. The machine had not been destroyed, but for the first time in years, it was being forced to explain itself. Marcus Ellison stood outside the federal courthouse just after 8 in the morning, coffee in one hand, leather folder in the other. The same curb lane stretched beside him where everything had begun. Fresh signage had been installed. Clear markings. New oversight contact numbers. Cameras visible and functioning. Funny how fast clarity appears when accountability moves in. He looked down the block as commuters hurried past, collars raised against the cold. Most did not recognize him. He preferred that. Praise can be as distracting as criticism if you let it linger too long. Captain Laura Bennett joined him carrying 2 paper cups. "You are early," she said. "You are later than usual," he replied. She handed him one of the cups. "The city council approved permanent reforms last night." "Good. And 3 neighboring counties requested our review model." Marcus almost smiled. Nothing spreads like embarrassment. She laughed softly. For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence, watching buses kneel at stops and taxis argue with traffic. Then Bennett nodded toward the opposite sidewalk. "You have company." Ryan Keller stood near the crosswalk in a dark coat, hands in pockets, posture altered by humility or weather or both. He looked older than 3 weeks should allow. No cameras followed him now. No one cared enough to film a fallen man buying coffee or waiting for the light. There is mercy hidden in public forgetfulness. He crossed when the signal changed and stopped several feet away. "Mr. Ellison," he said. Marcus turned fully toward him, but said nothing. Ryan held out an envelope. "I know you do not owe me your time." Marcus accepted the envelope without opening it. "What is it?" "My resignation letter was public." "That is not." Ryan glanced toward the street. "It is a statement for the training board. Full admission, patterns, incentives, everything I knew." Marcus studied him. "Why now?" Ryan gave a tired breath that might once have been a laugh. "Because I spent years calling consequences unfair when they were only unfamiliar." Wind moved between the buildings, tugging at coat hems and carrying the smell of roasted coffee from a cart nearby. Marcus tucked the envelope into his folder. "That may help people." Ryan nodded. "I hope so." He hesitated, then added, "I was wrong about more than you." Marcus answered without cruelty. "Most prejudices." Ryan looked as if he wanted to say more, then thought better of it. Growth often begins when speech becomes less urgent. "Take care, Mr. Ellison. Learn something, Mr. Keller." Ryan gave one small nod and walked north into the moving crowd until he looked like anyone else. Marcus watched only a second before turning back to the courthouse steps. Captain Bennett raised an eyebrow. "Closure?" "No," Marcus said. "Direction." They entered the building together as morning light spilled across the sidewalk. Inside, elevators opened, phones rang, cases waited, and the next unfinished problem was already asking for attention. Marcus pressed the button for 12. The doors began to close, then paused as a janitor hurried in with a mop bucket and a smile. Marcus held the door and stepped aside. Small gestures matter more than speeches when no one is recording. As the elevator rose, he looked once through the narrowing gap toward the curb outside where a tow hook had touched the wrong vehicle and exposed the wrong system. Some men think power is what lets them interrupt another person's day. Real power is what makes sure they cannot keep doing it.